the winless Detroit Pistons, 25th straight loss. They lose last night at home to a undermanned Utah Jazz team, 119 to 111. Utah coming in on the second night of a back-to-back, shorthanded. They had Kelly Olynyk looking like Larry Bird out there last night. Uh, this thing, I mean, this is clearly beyond rock bottom here. What do you make of this mess in Detroit, man?
Oh, it's a disaster. And I was looking it up the other day. The Lakers' longest losing streak in the history of their organization is 10 games. So you could take that, double it, and you'd still
Wow.
only come up with 20. You got 25 for the Detroit Pistons. And there's too much talent for this to take place, because just go back and look at the main minute getters on the 2011 Cavaliers, who have the 26 game losing streak, and the names are far worse than the guys on this roster. Same thing for that 2016 Sixers team, who was losing games on purpose, right? That Philadelphia team that lost 26 straight, they were losing games on purpose. They were tanking. They were trying to get high draft picks as part of the process. And then that 2011 Cavaliers team was the year after LeBron left, and they didn't really have time to pivot in order to redo that roster. They were caught off guard. This Detroit team hasn't won a playoff series since 2008. So this is like deep into the rebuilding process, and they're losing at this rate. And again, you've got high draft picks all littering that roster. I mean, Cade Cunningham's the #1 overall pick.
Yeah.
Bagley's the second overall pick. Wiseman's the second overall pick. Jaden Ivey's a top 5 pick. Asir Thompson is the top 5 pick, even though I love him.
Yeah.
Jalen Duren's a lottery pick. Killian Hayes is a lottery pick. And, when you've lost 25 straight games, they're not good, but they're way too good to have lost 25 straight.
They're awful. They're god awful. And the fact that they didn't, that the Jazz didn't have Markkanen, Keontae George, or anything, or who else did they have? They didn't even have Clarkson out there. Like, what are we doing, man? Like, if I'm the Pistons, I think you got to start thinking of like what other moves I'm going to make just so that way I can get back to being competitive, because you have so much youthful talent on that team, and the fact that you can't get anything going right now is just awful. I'm looking to make trades if I'm Detroit, just because you got to do something in order to keep some of these players around. Like Cade, I mean, I know he had his comments that we're going to get to that, but at some point, these guys are going to want out. And at some point, like, you're going to look at this organization like, is this a serious franchise? Why do I want to stay here? Why would I want to go to this organization, whether you're being drafted or whatnot? And then you have to entice free agents to just come there as well to help develop these players. It's just gross for what's
well,
happening.
you're never going to get a free agent in Detroit, right? So that's the issue. Even if you're good, you're going to have issues. Like LeBron had trouble getting guys to go to Cleveland, especially the first time around, just because guys don't want to live there. Even though I like Cleveland, and I think it's a great sports town. I mean, I think Detroit's a really good sports town as well. But something's got to be done. You're right. You can't lose 25 straight games and go, all right, well, hey, guys, we'll try and go out and get him tomorrow. And nothing's going to be done with Monty Williams. You just handed him $78.5 million. So you can't eat that. Troy Weaver, though, and I understand that he got an extension last summer.
He's got
he's been there for a while. So whether it's a move with him, whether it's a move with, somebody on the roster just going, we can't sit still. Like, maybe we'll lose this trade. Like, maybe if we deal this guy, it's going to turn out bad for us, but we got to shake things up a little bit. And I was on Simmons's podcast last night, and I talked about what happened in Boston last year. They fell down 3-0 to Miami. Wick Grusbeck, who's their owner, despite all the success recently, he didn't just sit in the stands and watch it and go, all right, this is acceptable. He was humiliated. So he went into that locker room. I don't know if you read the story when it happened, and he was throwing chairs and he was screaming at guys. And he was, and these are guys that have egos. These are millionaires. These guys are much more accomplished in Tatum and Brown and now Horford than anybody on that Pistons roster. And he says, you are humiliating us. Your effort is unacceptable. Like, at the very least, Tom Gores has to maybe go in and do something like that. To light a fire under them, at least show the Piston fan that somebody within that organization cares.
Yeah, he absolutely does, because, I mean, at 15th rank in attendance, the people are still showing up. So he better go march into that locker room before they stop showing up. I mean, they're there last night selling sell the team, but at least they're there. They're making noise. They're trying to get these guys going. But, I mean, this is just a listless group. But the surprising thing is, for such a young team, and Cade Cunningham is calling out their effort. I mean, they got out hustled last night. 50 points Utah scored off of between second chance points and points off of turnovers. 50 points. And so, my question is, I guess, they invest all this money in Monty Williams. Where were you when they first got him? And what do you think now? Like, is he the right guy for this Pistons rebuild?
Well, I know Monty pretty well, and I've talked to him several different times. But here's what I would say, and I'm not saying he's not a good head coach. I think he did a good job in Phoenix, but he didn't want to be there. I mean, he didn't
Right,
want the job initially, and
right.
then you threw all this money at him, and he couldn't turn it down. $78.5 million for a head coach is unprecedented. $13 million a year, unprecedented. So he had to take the money. So you wonder where his heart is, right? Is
Right,
this something
right.
that he was truly invested in? Or is this something he's just doing because he couldn't turn it down because of the compensation that was involved? Like it might not even be something where he's purposely not putting in the effort or his heart's purposely not in it. Like he might be showing up to work and grinding and going through the process, but subconsciously, maybe he was just never invested at the start. And it's something where you have to analyze every single different avenue. Now, they're not going to fire Monty. Could Monty say this is destroying my life? Like I can't, it's eating me up, and go to them and say, hey, I'll walk away? Maybe he could do that, but they're not going to pay him $65+ million to not come back and to leave.
Yeah, that's what I wonder, Alice. Like Justin said, he turned it down the first time. So was his heart really in it? That's what I really wondered when he first signed on with them. But go ahead.
Look, I hope his heart is in the fact of coaching and not necessarily where his location is, because if it's not in that, like, then he's going to damage his own reputation too. Where it's like, well, I didn't really want to go here, so I don't really feel like coaching. Like, I get that. I get that's not your top destination, but at some point, like, if this is going to be your livelihood and you're going to have to coach, like, you got to step up to the challenge, especially if you're getting this much money. Like, regardless, like, I get it. Detroit's not it's not the sexiest name out there. It's not where you necessarily want to go. It's not the greatest night scene in my opinion, from the times that I've been there. But look, you're there now. You're trying to make the best of it, and you try to show that you're an adaptable coach. I get it. You had more of like a veteran team when you're out in Phoenix, right? You also get Chris Paul in there who helps organize an offense. You don't have that. It's a young team, and it requires a lot more work. It requires a lot more encouragement. It requires just that much more detail and attentiveness that maybe he wasn't expecting as to being a head coach. We always talk about Tom Thibodeau and all these other coaches like a Vogel, who's like, they're really good for a veteran team that's ready to compete right now. Maybe that is what it is for Monty, but at the end of the day, you got to coach. And I think if you show that you're adaptable and you can work with a young team, you're gonna find even more success throughout the league. So
yeah, I mean, and he went to Phoenix, remember, and they were initially young, and they initially were coming off like really a similar run to Detroit had.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they had a star in Devin Booker, right? And we didn't know he was maybe this good, but then he took off, and that helped Monty. And then Monty's relationship with Chris Paul helped bring in Chris Paul after that, and they took off from there. This is going to be a much harder rebuild because there's nobody like Devin Booker on that roster. The one thing you just can't have is the lack of hustle, and you saw that last night on certain defensive possessions. You're not good enough to have those kind of blips, right? You're good enough to do that if you're maybe the Milwaukee Bucks or the Denver Nuggets or the Boston Celtics, the New York Knicks in certain cases. If you're playing very bad teams, you can't do that if you're the Detroit Pistons, even against the bad teams. And guess what? If you're not going to hustle, if you're going to lose games like that, we're going to be talking about you not today, not tomorrow. We're going to be talking about you in 20 years as the worst team of all time. I work with Fred Mad Dog Carter. He's a part of those 76ers teams, 1973. They won 9 games the entire season. Worst team of all time in an 82-game schedule. I can still list off his name, okay, because he was a part of that organization, and he's got that distinction. It follows him around forever. When we're talking about the worst teams ever, we're talking about the longest losing streaks ever. Guess what? Cade Cunningham's name's coming up. Bogdanovich's name's coming up. Monty Williams' name. Jaden Ivey's name. Duran's name. Wiseman's name. You want to be associated with that? That should be motivation enough that I'm not watching Kelly Olynyk blow by you because you're just not feeling it right now, with 5 or 6 minutes left in a close game.
Well, they better get it together because it's going to be the opponents that are going to be hustling and motivated to not lose to this Pistons team going forward. Because, I mean, the other night they had the Knicks on the ropes, man. I was about to lose it. So we'll see what happens there.